Hey man, before you forgive her again, take a deep breath. And remember what happened the last time you did. Remember how easily she said sorry, how convincing she sounded when she said she'd change, and how your heart, wanting to believe, wanting to heal, opened the door one more time. And for a brief moment, everything felt good again. The laughs returned, the affection resurfaced, and you almost forgot why you were hurt in the first place. But slowly, almost predictably, the patterns began to repeat. The same cold tone, the same dismissive attitude, the same emotional distance that made you question yourself all over again. See, the problem isn't that you forgave her. The problem is that you mistook comfort for change. You wanted peace so badly that you convinced yourself she had evolved, when in reality, she simply paused her behavior long enough to make you lower your guard again. You have to understand this truth, and it's not easy to swallow. When a woman truly respects you, she doesn't need to be forgiven for the same thing twice. When she feels genuine remorse, her actions shift immediately. Not because you demand it, but because she sees the pain she caused, and it shakes her. But when her apologies feel like rehearsed scripts, when her tone sounds familiar instead of sincere, you're not dealing with guilt, you're dealing with manipulation. Some women don't say "I'm sorry" to heal the relationship, they say it to reset their control. They know the kind of man you are, loyal, patient, emotionally invested, and they know how to use that empathy against you. So, when she feels you pulling away, she doesn't change her ways, she changes her approach. The words soften, the eyes tear up, and she plays the victim. And because you have a good heart, you fall for it again. But let me tell you something, most men learn too late. Forgiveness without accountability isn't compassion, it's self-betrayal. Every time you take her back without seeing real transformation, you're not healing the relationship, you're reinforcing her behavior. You're teaching her that you'll always return, no matter how deeply she cuts. You're showing her that all she has to do is say the right thing, cry at the right moment, and you'll forget the disrespect. That's not love, that's conditioning. You're not building trust, you're erasing your boundaries. And the more you do it, the more she loses respect for you. Not because she's cruel, but because that's how emotional psychology works. People don't value what they can repeatedly hurt without consequence. Every time you forgive her too soon, you confirm that your love is unconditional, even when hers isn't. The worst part is that she knows. She knows exactly how much you care. She knows that deep down, you want things to work, that you'd rather fix than walk away. And that's what gives her power. Not her beauty, not her words, but your hope. Hope becomes the leash she pulls when she feels you slipping. One compliment, one late night text, one reminder of how things used to be, and suddenly she's back in your head. And that's where the trap lies. Because the cycle of manipulation doesn't restart with her actions, it restarts with your forgiveness. She doesn't have to change if she knows you'll always do the emotional work for both of you. That's why, before you forgive her again, you need to ask yourself, is she apologizing because she understands your pain, or because she's afraid of losing her control over you? The answer to that question decides whether you'll finally heal or just restart the same wound. Real forgiveness comes with wisdom, not amnesia. It's not about holding grudges, it's about learning patterns. You can wish her well, you can let go of resentment, but you don't have to give her access again. Boundaries aren't walls, they're filters that protect your peace. The moment you realize that, everything changes, because you'll start seeing her behavior, not through the lens of emotion, but through the lens of patterns. Does she actually listen when you express how you feel, or does she just wait for her turn to talk? Does she show consistency when she promises to improve, or does she fall back into comfort the moment you soften? These questions aren't about blame, they're about clarity. Because love without clarity is chaos, and forgiveness without change is just self-destruction with a halo on top. Before you forgive her again, remind yourself how easily she forgot your pain last time, how she minimized what you felt, how she turned your hurt into an argument about her feelings, how she made you question your own sanity for even bringing it up. That's what emotional manipulation looks like. It's not always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's quiet, subtle, and disguised as softness. She'll tell you she didn't mean to, that you're overthinking, that you're making a big deal out of nothing. And because you want harmony, you'll doubt yourself instead of her. But understand this. Anyone who repeatedly makes you question your own reality doesn't want peace, they want power. Forgiveness isn't noble when it keeps you trapped in confusion. It's not maturity when it keeps you in cycles of disrespect. Forgiving someone who keeps hurting you isn't strength, it's surrender. A woman who truly loves you won't want you to forgive her easily. She'll want to earn it. She'll take responsibility, not shift blame. She'll sit in the discomfort of her actions, not hide behind excuses. Real remorse humbles a person. It changes their tone, their consistency, their energy. You'll see it in how she shows up, quieter, more intentional, more careful with your heart. But the woman who's addicted to control doesn't want change. She wants restoration of comfort. She'll rush the healing process because your boundaries threaten her position. She'll say, "Can't we just move past it?" When what she really means is, "I don't want to be held accountable." And the moment you cave, the cycle resets. Because a woman who's never been forced to earn forgiveness will never learn to value it. You see, men like you, empathetic, patient, deeply loyal, are magnets for manipulation, not because you're weak, but because your strength is misunderstood. You think loving deeply means tolerating pain, but it doesn't. Real love isn't proven by how much you can endure, it's proven by how much you refuse to repeat. Forgiveness without discernment becomes a weakness in the wrong hands, and when she realizes you forgive to avoid conflict, she'll start using conflict to control you. Every time you try to hold her accountable, she'll twist the narrative. Suddenly, you're too serious, too sensitive, too controlling. She'll reframe your standards as flaws. And because you don't want to seem cold or unloving, you'll start lowering your expectations. You'll silence yourself. You'll shrink. That's how strong men lose themselves, not in the explosion of heartbreak, but in the slow erosion of boundaries disguised as compassion. Before you forgive her again, ask yourself this: what are you actually forgiving? Are you forgiving a mistake or a mindset? Because there's a difference. A mistake can be corrected. A mindset has to be unlearned. If she cheated, lied, disrespected you, or manipulated your emotions, that's not a single act, that's a belief system. She believed she could do it and get away with it. She believed you'd always be there no matter what. She believed that her beauty, her charm, or her tears would override your logic. And as long as that belief remains intact, she'll keep doing it. Maybe not in the same way, but with the same intention. That's why forgiving her too soon doesn't heal her guilt, it rewards it. Because instead of learning that love requires accountability, she learns that love guarantees forgiveness. And that's the tragic part. Every time you forgive her too quickly, you rob her of the very growth that could have saved her. You think you're helping her heal, but what you're really doing is enabling her stagnation. You're protecting her from the discomfort that could have taught her respect. Some women only learn through loss. Some only reflect when they're alone. And some only see a man's value when his silence replaces his sympathy. So before you forgive her again, consider this: maybe the most loving thing you can do isn't to take her back, but to let her sit in the reality of losing you. Because sometimes, walking away is the only language that immaturity understands. And when she finally realizes that your forgiveness wasn't an invitation but a farewell, she'll know. She didn't lose your love, she lost her last chance to deserve it. When you stop forgiving her automatically, the shift in her world is immediate. She'll feel that silence differently, not as absence but as exposure, because now there's no emotional safety net to fall back on. You're not cushioning her actions with understanding anymore. You're not explaining her behavior to yourself just to make sense of it. You're not absorbing the blame that was never yours to carry. Suddenly, she's forced to face herself without the mirror of your patience. That's what true accountability looks like. Not revenge, not hatred, but distance. When you stop forgiving what she refuses to fix, you strip her of the illusion that she can do anything she wants and still have your loyalty. It's in that distance that she finally starts feeling the weight of her choices, because nothing humbles a woman faster than realizing the man she thought would always forgive her finally stopped. You see, your silence after betrayal doesn't just unsettle her, it terrifies her. Because silence means reflection, and reflection means growth. She knows that if you're not reacting, you're thinking. And if you're thinking, you're seeing her clearly, without the filter of emotion or attachment. That's when her confidence starts to shake. She'll start checking your social media, asking mutual friends how you've been, trying to pick up clues about whether you've moved on. Because what she fears most isn't that you hate her, it's that you've outgrown her. She can handle your anger because anger still means you care. But peace? Peace means indifference. And once a man reaches that state, he becomes unreachable. That's the real consequence of losing a good man. Not his presence, but his attention. Once he learns to give his love only where it's respected, she can't ever manipulate him the same way again. Forgiving her again would only drag you back into the storm you've already escaped. It would pull you into the same pattern where she apologizes, you forgive, and she slowly slips back into her old behavior once she feels secure again. And the truth is, every time you take her back, her respect for you dies a little more, because deep down she equates your tolerance with weakness. Not consciously, but emotionally. The feminine instinct tests boundaries. It pushes to see what you'll allow. And when she realizes that your love outweighs your self-respect, she can't help but lose attraction. It's a paradox that most men don't understand. The more you let her cross your boundaries, the less she values your heart. So before you forgive her again, ask yourself, do you want her comfort or her respect? Because the two rarely coexist once boundaries have been broken. It's not your job to keep forgiving someone who uses your kindness as a shield against accountability. Real love requires standards, not endless tolerance. You're not cruel for walking away from disrespect. You're not heartless for protecting your peace. You're not bitter for refusing to rebuild something she keeps breaking. You're just done mistaking pain for purpose. There's a quiet strength in saying no more. It's not revenge, it's redemption. Because forgiveness doesn't always mean reconciliation. Sometimes it means letting go of the version of her that will never change and accepting that the lesson was the real gift. Once you realize that, her apologies will stop moving you. You'll see through the tears, through the timing, through the words. Because you'll know, love doesn't need manipulation to survive. It needs maturity. And if she can't meet you there, then walking away isn't giving up. It's growing up. Before you forgive her again, understand this final truth. She doesn't need another chance. You do. A chance to heal without being gaslit. A chance to rebuild your self-respect. A chance to finally see what your love looks like when it's not being drained by emotional games. Every time you give her another chance, you delay your own recovery. You keep the wound open, hoping she'll be the one to heal it, when in reality, she's the one who caused it. The real closure doesn't come from hearing her say, "I'm sorry." It comes from accepting that her words will never match her actions. Forgive her, not so she can come back, but so you can finally move forward. Because sometimes, forgiveness isn't the doorway back to love. It's the boundary that keeps your peace intact. And when you choose that peace over her chaos, you'll realize you never needed her to change. You just needed to remember who you were before you kept forgiving the wrong person. When she finally realizes you're not forgiving her this time, the silence becomes deafening. At first, she'll try to convince herself that you're just angry, that you'll come back like you always do. She'll replay the same old cycle in her head. Hurt, apology, reconciliation, comfort. But when days turn into weeks, and your energy remains unmoved, she'll start to panic. That panic won't be loud, it'll be quiet, internal, filled with denial. She'll scroll through your old texts, reread your last messages, and overanalyze your final words, trying to find signs of weakness, some clue that you still care, because that's what she always relied on, your softness. But this time, she's not facing the man who used to forgive her. She's facing the man she created by breaking him one too many times. And that version of you doesn't react emotionally anymore. He observes, he remembers, he moves on. And that's when she starts trying to re-enter your life in small, subtle ways. The accidental likes on social media, the random hope you're doing well text, the nostalgic memory she brings up to test the waters. But these aren't signs of love, they're signs of guilt. Guilt disguised as curiosity. She's not checking on you, she's checking if she still has influence over you. Because as long as you respond, even politely, she feels relevant again. But when you don't, when you remain kind but distant, calm but unavailable, that's when it finally sinks in. She doesn't have power over you anymore. And for women who rely on emotional control, that loss feels worse than heartbreak. It's ego death, because she's no longer the woman who left. She's now the one who's being ignored. And that role reversal eats her alive. See, forgiveness is emotional currency. It's what keeps her world spinning. When she knows she can always come back, she never has to face the full weight of her actions. But the moment you take that currency away, when you stop giving her your time, your validation, your emotional attention, her world stops spinning. That's when she realizes what forgiveness actually meant. It wasn't about letting go of the past, it was about confirming to her that she still mattered. But now, when her name no longer triggers an emotional response from you, when her presence no longer shifts your peace, she's forced to sit in the emptiness she created. That's when she begins to understand. Forgiveness isn't a gift you owe her, it's one she has to earn. And when you stop giving it away freely, you become the lesson she never wanted to learn. This is where your power becomes visible, not in how loud you are, but in how untouched you've become. You don't need to prove anything to her anymore. You're not angry, you're not bitter, you're just done. You've seen what patterns do, how apologies lose meaning when they're used as tools instead of truths. And now, instead of waiting for her to be better, you've become better yourself. That growth changes your entire energy. You're sharper, calmer, more focused. You carry yourself differently, and she feels it. She'll sense that your peace no longer includes her, and that's what drives her crazy. Because when a woman realizes that her chaos no longer has a place in your calm, she starts craving the very stability she once took for granted. You've become the anchor she let go of, and now all she can do is watch from the shore as you sail away quietly without her. But here's the most powerful part. When you finally stop forgiving her, you don't lose your heart. You find your backbone. You learn that boundaries are the highest form of self-respect. You stop confusing loyalty with self-abandonment. You stop apologizing for expecting consistency. You realize that forgiveness, when given too freely, doesn't heal. It hides wounds that never close. So now, you forgive her privately, in silence, but you never give her access to repeat the damage. You wish her peace, but you keep your distance. Because forgiveness without distance is how men get broken, and distance without forgiveness is how men stay bitter. But when you master both, when you can release her emotionally and still protect yourself mentally, that's when you win. That's when you rise above the pattern, above the pain, above the illusion that love means staying no matter what. Real love starts with leaving, when your peace is no longer respected. It's in that silence that you'll find something you never experienced before: clarity. You'll start to see just how much energy you used to pour into her emotions, her moods, her endless cycles of drama. You'll realize how small your world had become, trying to fit into the chaos of hers. But now, without that noise, you begin to breathe again. You start sleeping better, thinking clearer, dreaming bigger. You rediscover the man you were before forgiveness became your survival mechanism. That's the real awakening. When you realize you don't need to fix her to find peace. You only need to release her. Because not everyone you love is meant to heal with you. Some are meant to hurt you just enough to teach you what love isn't. And once that lesson sinks in, you stop chasing closure from people who were never capable of giving it. Meanwhile, she's stuck in a loop she doesn't understand. She'll try to move on, to distract herself, to find a man who makes her feel what you once did. But deep down, she knows something's missing. Your patience, your calmness, your consistency. She'll try to replicate it, but she won't be able to. Because what she lost wasn't just you, it was access to her better self. You brought out a version of her that only existed in the safety of your presence. And when you left, that version disappeared with you. That's why she'll keep searching but never finding. Because you can replace attention, but you can't replace energy. And the energy of a man who forgave out of love, not weakness. That energy is rare. She'll realize too late that your forgiveness wasn't something to exploit, it was something to protect. Now, as she drifts further away from your life, you begin to understand how forgiveness was never meant to be a revolving door. It's supposed to be a boundary, not an invitation. You see, forgiving her doesn't mean you let her back in. It means you finally let her go without hatred. It means you can look back without resentment, speak her name without tension, and move forward without fear. That's maturity. Because real forgiveness isn't about giving her another chance, it's about giving yourself a new beginning. The man who learns to forgive without returning becomes emotionally untouchable. He's not driven by anger or nostalgia anymore, he's driven by peace. And peace, once earned, becomes the most addictive state of being you'll ever experience. And that's what she'll never understand, that your greatest act of love wasn't forgiving her once, it was forgiving her and walking away. because walking away didn't mean you stopped caring, it meant you started caring about yourself too. It meant you finally saw that saving her was costing you your soul. And when a man realizes that, he stops trying to win hearts and starts protecting his own. That's the evolution she'll never get to witness, the version of you that no longer bleeds for people who hand you the knife. You've become calm in a world addicted to chaos, and that calmness, that unbothered strength, will follow you everywhere, into your work, your relationships, your purpose. Because once you stop forgiving the wrong woman, the right one never has to ask you to. So before you forgive her again, ask yourself this one question: does she deserve redemption, or are you just afraid of letting go? Because love that costs you your peace is not love, it's addiction. And every time you go back, you feed that addiction. But when you finally choose to stop forgiving what breaks you, the healing begins. You start walking lighter, talking wiser, moving stronger. You begin to attract peace instead of chaos, loyalty instead of games, depth instead of drama. And one day you'll look back, not with anger, not with sadness, but with gratitude. Because she was never your forever, she was your awakening. The one who taught you that forgiveness isn't about second chances, it's about final ones. And when you finally learn to forgive without reopening the door, you'll understand. Peace was the person you were supposed to be with all along. Once you reach that stage of peace, something changes inside you permanently. You stop chasing validation through relationships and start seeing connection for what it truly is. Two whole people choosing each other, not two broken people trying to heal each other. You no longer crave the highs and lows that come from emotional chaos. You crave stability, presence, and quiet confidence. That's what real maturity feels like. You stop being the man who forgives out of fear of losing love and become the man who forgives because he already has love within himself. That shift changes everything. The kind of women you attract, the kind of energy you entertain, and the kind of peace you protect. You start valuing silence more than arguments, solitude more than company. That drains you, and your own energy more than anyone's approval. And the moment you do that, you become the kind of man she can't ever manipulate again. Women can sense this change even without words. They feel it in your presence, that you're no longer emotionally available in the same way. Not cold, not distant, but self-contained. There's a stillness in your energy that unnerves those who used to control you emotionally. The same woman who once tested your patience will now hesitate to test your boundaries. She'll notice that your tone doesn't shift when she flirts, that your mood doesn't depend on her attention, and that your peace doesn't break when she withdraws. That's the silent authority of a man who's done chasing, done convincing, done explaining. And ironically, that's when women become drawn to you again. Not because you changed for them, but because you changed for yourself. When you stop forgiving everyone just to keep them around, you attract people who never put you in that position to begin with. You'll start to understand that forgiveness, in its purest form, isn't about erasing what happened. It's about erasing the control it has over you. It's about saying, yes, that happened, but it doesn't define me anymore. You stop reliving the pain every time her name crosses your mind. You stop analyzing where it went wrong and start appreciating how far you've come. Because every time you resisted forgiving her in the past, you weren't resisting her, you were resisting the lesson. You were holding on to the illusion that things could go back to how they were. But once you fully forgive and release, that illusion dies, and in its place grows something far more powerful: indifference. Not apathy, but indifference. The kind that comes from emotional mastery. You no longer need closure from her, you are the closure. This kind of detachment doesn't make you heartless, it makes you free. You begin to see through the masks that people wear in relationships, the charm, the flattery, the need for control disguised as love. You recognize manipulation faster, you walk away sooner, and you recover quicker. And most importantly, you stop trying to fix women with your love. You understand that some people only love what they can use, not what they can value. And that realization doesn't make you cynical, it makes you calm, because you no longer need to prove your worth to anyone. You know who you are, what you offer, and what you deserve. That awareness becomes your armor. It keeps you grounded, centered, and completely unfazed by the games that once consumed you. You're not the man who begs for love anymore. You're the man love must earn. And that's the full circle moment. When the man who once forgave endlessly becomes the man who needs no forgiveness to find peace, you've evolved beyond emotional chaos. You've transcended the pain that once ruled you. The forgiveness that used to break you now builds you. It no longer comes from desperation, but from dominance, emotional dominance. You forgive because you've mastered yourself, not because you're hoping she'll change. And when that kind of peace takes root, you stop living to be understood and start living to be aligned. The people meant for you will never put you in positions that force you to compromise your boundaries. The women meant for you will never make you beg for basic respect, and the love meant for you will never need to be forgiven, because it won't come at the cost of your self-worth. When you reach this level of peace, it's not loud. It doesn't announce itself through anger or bitterness. It shows up in your composure, in the way you no longer flinch when you see her name pop up, in the way your heart doesn't race when she tries to reappear, in the way you no longer feel that desperate need to be understood. You're simply done. And that kind of calm scares her more than any argument ever could. Because when a man who once loved deeply stops reacting, it means he's no longer emotionally invested. She'll sense that her words, her apologies, her attempts to rekindle the spark have no power anymore. And deep down, she knows, once a man reaches that level of control, there's no coming back. You've become untouchable, not because you don't care, but because you finally learned how to care for yourself first. You start noticing something strange. You don't crave her closure anymore. You don't even need to explain why you walked away, because when you evolve beyond the chaos, explanations become unnecessary. People who understand your peace don't need explanations, and those who don't will twist your words anyway. So you stop wasting breath. You've already said everything you needed to say through your silence. That silence becomes your final statement, louder than any text, stronger than any apology, sharper than any goodbye. And in that silence, something beautiful happens. The world around you starts reflecting your inner peace. You attract better people, healthier energy, and a new kind of love. One that isn't built on fixing, forgiving, or proving. It's built on mutual respect, understanding, and balance. And when you experience that, you'll wonder why you ever fought so hard to keep the wrong person. Meanwhile, she's caught in a loop of regret and confusion. She can't understand why her usual tactics don't work anymore. Why you're not chasing, not responding, not showing signs of emotional weakness. She'll tell herself, you've changed. But what she doesn't realize is that you've simply awakened. You're no longer reacting from the place of a man who needs to be loved. You're acting from the place of a man who knows his value. She'll test you again, indirectly, subtly. Because women who lose power over a man's emotions often try to regain it through nostalgia. A random message, a memory, a sudden burst of affection, all designed to pull you back into her world. But it won't work this time. Because the man who has tasted emotional peace will never trade it for temporary pleasure. You've learned the ultimate discipline, restraint. And that restraint is what separates the strong from the broken. It's easy to react. It's easy to fall back into old patterns. But real power lies in doing nothing. It lies in staying silent when everything in you wants to respond. It lies in staying calm when she expects anger. It lies in smiling when she expects pain. Because your silence doesn't mean weakness, it means you're finally in control. You flip the script completely. The man who once begged for love now chooses solitude. The man who once over-explained now lets silence do the talking. The man who once chased validation now lives in self-approval. And ironically, that's when she starts chasing you. Because women are instinctively drawn to emotional strength. The man who no longer needs them becomes the man they crave the most. But here's the truth you must remember. Her sudden interest isn't always about love. It's about control. She misses the version of herself she used to be when she had power over you. She doesn't want you back. She wants her ego back. That's why it's so important to stay grounded when she reappears. Don't confuse her regret for realization. Regret is about her pain. Realization is about your value. One is selfish, the other is self-aware. And most women, when they lose a good man, don't truly realize what they've done. They just regret losing the comfort he provided. So when she comes back with soft words, tears, and nostalgia, don't get trapped by emotion. Observe. Stay detached. Remember that the same woman who cries now once watched you break without blinking. Never let her tears rewrite the truth of how you got here. And when you don't take her back, when you remain kind but distant, that's when she truly breaks. Because rejection from a man she once controlled hits differently. It forces her to confront her own reflection, the part of herself she's been avoiding. She'll realize that you didn't change suddenly, you evolved gradually. You just reached your breaking point in silence. And now, your absence echoes louder than your presence ever did. She'll see you moving differently, talking less, smiling more, and it'll haunt her. Because now, every glimpse of your peace is a reminder of her mistake. That's when she begins to understand the real consequence of losing a good man. It's not that you stopped loving her, it's that you stopped needing her. You see, emotional detachment isn't about being cold, it's about being wise. It's about recognizing that love without respect destroys a man from the inside out. You used to think love meant forgiveness, tolerance, patience, and yes, it does, but not at the cost of your dignity. Love without boundaries isn't love, it's self-abandonment. And that's the lesson you learn the hard way. You now understand that you can love deeply and still walk away. You can care and still remain silent. You can forgive and still never look back. That's emotional mastery. That's the mark of a man who's no longer ruled by impulse, but guided by purpose. And when you carry that kind of calm, the world starts respecting you differently. People feel it, the quiet confidence of a man who no longer seeks peace, because he is peace. And here's the paradox. The more detached you become, the more powerful your presence feels. You don't chase women anymore, yet they chase your energy. You don't over-explain, yet people hang on your every word. You don't try to impress, yet your silence demands attention. That's what happens when you stop seeking validation. You become the validation. You become the calm in the storm, the center that others orbit around. And in that state, love becomes something different. It's not about ownership, control, or proving worth. It's about choice. You no longer love because you need to. You love because you choose to. That's what makes your love valuable now. It's rare, intentional, and free from desperation. Meanwhile, the woman who lost you will spend months, maybe years, trying to fill that void, but it won't work. Because the kind of love you gave wasn't ordinary. It came with patience, consistency, and loyalty, qualities that can't be replaced by new attention. She'll realize that what she thought was boring was actually stability. What she mistook for weakness was actually emotional strength. And what she dismissed as predictability was actually peace. That realization will hit her in waves. Every time another man fails to provide what you once gave effortlessly. And that's the cruel truth about losing a real man. It doesn't hurt immediately. It hurts gradually, as the contrast becomes clearer. So, before you ever think of forgiving her again, remember this. Sometimes the lesson isn't to love harder, it's to love smarter. It's to recognize that peace is more powerful than passion, that silence speaks louder than arguments, and that walking away isn't weakness, it's wisdom. When you stop forgiving what breaks you, you stop bleeding for people who never plan to heal you. And when you finally understand that your love is a gift, not a guarantee, you'll stop giving it to anyone who hasn't earned it. That's when your entire life changes, your relationships, your purpose, your energy. Because a man who no longer needs to be forgiven or understood becomes the rarest kind of man alive, one who is finally whole. When you reach this level of inner wholeness, something profound begins to happen. Women no longer respond to you the same way they once did. The same games that used to hook you emotionally no longer register as exciting. They look immature, predictable, and even a little sad. You begin to see through manipulation with ease. You recognize the difference between genuine connection and emotional theater. You no longer fall for mixed signals because your clarity exposes their confusion. You've trained your emotions to serve you, not control you, and that terrifies people who relied on your reactions to validate their worth. The woman who once kept you anxious by withdrawing now feels anxious when you stay calm. She can't shake your peace, and that's when she realizes you're no longer just another man. You're the kind of man she can't control, can't replace, and can't forget. This is where you begin to live life on a different frequency. You start noticing that the things that once drained you, overthinking, arguing, chasing, no longer have a place in your world. You're operating from emotional abundance now, not scarcity. You've learned that peace isn't the absence of problems, it's the presence of discipline. And that discipline shows in the way you handle women, work, and even your solitude. You stop seeking excitement from chaos and find fulfillment in simplicity. You don't rush into relationships. You observe. You don't attach to beauty. You test character. You don't try to impress. You express. You've become the kind of man who doesn't just attract love. He commands respect through presence alone. That quiet confidence, that stillness in your energy draws people in naturally, without effort. And here's the beautiful irony. Once you stop chasing women, you become the kind of man every woman chases. Not because you're playing games, but because you've elevated yourself beyond them. Your self-control becomes magnetic. Your detachment becomes mysterious. Your peace becomes seductive. You've become the man who can walk away from anything that disrupts his equilibrium. And women, especially those used to emotional chaos, can't resist that. They crave the emotional gravity you carry. But now, you're no longer impressed by attention. You understand that not all attention is admiration. Some of it is curiosity, some of it is envy, and some of it is simply fear of missing out. You no longer get pulled into every orbit that notices you. You've learned to protect your focus, your time, your soul. That's how kings move, not reactively, but intentionally. This new version of you doesn't argue with the past. He learns from it. You don't blame her for breaking you. You thank her for awakening you. Because without the pain, you would have never developed the strength. Without the betrayal, you would have never discovered your boundaries. Without the silence, you would have never learned self-control. Every heartbreak becomes a form of emotional alchemy, turning your suffering into self-mastery. And that's something most men never reach, because they stay trapped in anger instead of ascending through awareness. You've reached a stage where you can look at your past and feel gratitude instead of grief. You see how everything that fell apart was simply redirecting you toward your own becoming. That's when life starts to unfold effortlessly, because you've stopped resisting what's gone and started embracing what's next. Now, when women meet you, they feel that difference instantly. You're not bitter, you're balanced. You're not distant, you're disciplined. You're not cold, you're controlled. That combination confuses them because it's rare. Most men either overgive or shut down completely. You do neither. You know when to give and when to withdraw. You know how to listen without losing yourself in her story. You know how to care without collapsing into neediness. You've mastered the balance between empathy and detachment, and that balance is what makes you truly masculine. Not aggression, not dominance, but the quiet strength to remain centered no matter what storm you stand in. You're not fighting for control anymore, because you've realized that the man who controls himself already controls the outcome, and that's why your silence has become your most powerful weapon. It doesn't come from pride, it comes from awareness. You understand that words often give away energy, and you no longer waste energy on things that don't move you forward. When you're silent, she feels it. When you're silent, she questions herself. When you're silent, she remembers every time she took you for granted. That silence becomes a mirror, reflecting her own behavior back at her. And what she sees in that reflection isn't you. It's the emptiness she created when she underestimated you. That's why your silence drives her crazy. Because deep down, she knows that no amount of noise can fill the space left by a man who finally stopped explaining himself. But here's the key. Don't use silence as revenge. Use it as refinement. The goal isn't to make her suffer, it's to make yourself free. Silence, when used with purpose, isn't about ignoring someone. It's about honoring your own energy. It's about creating space between what hurt you and what heals you. It's about allowing clarity to replace confusion. You're not punishing her by walking away. You're protecting yourself from losing your peace again. That's what most men misunderstand. Detachment isn't cruelty, it's consciousness. It's realizing that you don't need to participate in every emotional storm that invites you. You've learned to watch chaos pass without reacting to it. That's emotional evolution. That's maturity in motion. And once you master that, your entire world transforms. You stop measuring your worth by how much someone loves you. You stop basing your peace on someone's presence. You stop giving people the power to define how you feel about yourself. You've reclaimed your emotional sovereignty. You don't chase love, you attract alignment. You don't beg for attention, you commend respect. You don't seek closure, you create it. That's the turning point where you stop living like a man who's been hurt and start living like a man who's been reborn. Every day becomes an act of self-respect. Every choice becomes a reflection of your growth, and every silence becomes a declaration of your strength. You've become what she never thought you would, a man who no longer needs her or anyone to feel complete. And strangely, that's when real love finally finds you. Not because you were looking for it, but because you became ready for it. Love now feels calm, steady, and mutual, not chaotic, uncertain, or one-sided. You no longer confuse intensity with intimacy or drama with passion. You've learned that real connection doesn't require constant reassurance. It thrives in mutual peace. The woman who enters your life now won't be impressed by your silence. She'll respect it. She won't test your boundaries. She'll align with them. She won't confuse your strength with detachment. She'll see it as stability, because the kind of woman you attract after healing is not the same kind of woman who broke you. She mirrors your energy, calm, confident, consistent, and that's the ultimate reward of your transformation. You stop chasing the wrong kind of love because you've become the right kind of man. You've walked through heartbreak, learned your lessons, rebuilt your spirit, and emerged untouchable. You've realized that forgiveness, silence, and detachment aren't signs of weakness, they're signs of mastery. You've learned that peace isn't found in being loved by others, but in being loyal to yourself. And once you reach that place, you'll never settle again. You'll never chase what isn't meant for you. You'll never explain your worth to anyone who can't see it, because now, you know, the man who learns to forgive without forgetting, to love without losing himself, and to walk away without hate is the man every woman remembers, but no one can ever own again.